Hey, this is Dustin Neely for Church Planning for the Rest of Us, and I'm here with my friend Owen Strachan, and he has written some really helpful books on Jonathan Edwards and all of his books. So why don't you tell us a little bit about these?
This series is called the Essential Edwards Collection. It's a collection of 5 short, readable volumes published by Moody Press. Doug Sweeney, my advisor at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, I'm a doctoral student there. He and I wrote these books, and we designed them to be very engaging for lay people, for pastors, for people who have heard of Jonathan Edwards, who want to benefit from his legacy, who may have read, a sermon here or there, but who do not have the time to go to the 25 imposing volumes in the Yale Works collection, if people have even heard of that,
right.
Because they're a little bit obscure, scholarly. But we want to boil those down so people can still benefit from the insights of Jonathan Edwards, the theology of Jonathan Edwards, the life of Edwards, without having to read, 5,000 pages.
Yeah, that's great. Well, why should anybody care about Jonathan Edwards in the first place? I mean, some of us grew up hearing about him in English class, and he seemed like some weird guy, and sinners in the hands of an angry God, and a lot of misconceptions about him out there. Tell us how these works kind of tell the other true side of the story.
The coolest thing about Jonathan Edwards was that he wore a starchy white wig and knickers. So that's definitely...
I love that.
He's contextual. No, we should be interested in Jonathan Edwards because he was, and I'm not making this up, these are not my claims. These are claims that secular academics would recognize. He's America's greatest pastor, America's greatest philosopher, America's greatest preacher, a great missionary, a college president, the first college president of what is today Princeton University. He's an incredible writer. Jonathan Edwards was one of those extremely rare individuals who could do it all and did do it all. So over the course of his life, he has the most extensive theological body of sermons of anyone in the American tradition. And he then, after getting kicked out of his church in 1750 in Northampton, Massachusetts, which is fascinating, it'd be like if Rick Warren or John Piper, Mark Driscoll were all of a sudden kicked out of their church. What would they do? Well, Jonathan Edwards went from his church in this nice colonial town to the wilderness of Massachusetts and became a missionary among the Mohican Indians for 6 years. And he loved it, and it was there, ironically, that he wrote 4 of his most fascinating and long-lasting volumes. And then, after being on the wilderness, the frontier for 6 years, he goes to the College of New Jersey, which then was just a couple buildings, and of course is what we know of as Princeton University. So he has this fascinating, episodic, bigger-than-life kind of life.
Well, that's great. Well, one of the things that gets kicked around in our day a little bit is about kind of the actual legacy with his family. I've read some that say, oh, he was the greatest guy and everything in the world, and then others, he neglected his family, not so much. What's your take on his actual legacy with his family?
That's a very interesting question. Jonathan Edwards worked extremely hard. 12, 14-hour days were very common. He would work in a little study that was about the size of a hall closet. He had this big kind of desk that he worked in, had lots of pieces of paper in it. But he worked essentially in a closet for 12, 14 hours a day, sitting a lot. He worked extremely hard. But we do have accounts of his family life from some of his proteges. A guy named Samuel Hopkins, for example, who lived with the Edwardses for a while. Hopkins says that Edwards was a warm father, that his children would come up and interrupt him. And he's in the middle of figuring out the freedom on the will, original sin, these treatises that have lasted for 300 years, and will continue to persist throughout the ages. And he would interrupt himself and talk to them. He catechized his children. He read scripture and prayed with them in the morning. So he was known as a warm, tender father. He had a very close relationship with Sarah, his wife. That's clear that he cultivated that with her. They produced 11 children. At the end of the day, though, he did work too hard. And I think that's a real rebuke to a lot of us who are driven, ambitious, even in a kingdom sense for the sake of the gospel. We need to be very careful and put limits on the amount of time we spend working versus the amount of time we spend with our family. So there is a caution there, although I do think he was a warm father.
That's good. Well, brother, thanks for your help and your words.
You got it.